My wife used a toxic husband scoring system to humiliate me. I called out the abuse, showed screenshots at game night, and chose dignity over marriage. When my wife announced she was hosting a fun couples game night where husbands would be rated on various categories, I should have known something was off. But nothing could have prepared me for the scorecard she handed me that Friday evening, complete with categories like provider quality, romantic gestures, and overall husband performance. She stood in our living room, practically glowing with excitement, as she explained the rules to me and the 3 other couples she'd invited over. The other wives were nodding enthusiastically, already pulling out their phones to access what appeared to be a shared spreadsheet. Their husbands looked as confused as I felt, but they were going along with it, probably thinking it was harmless fun. "It's like a friendly competition," she said, her voice carrying that tone she used when she thought she was being clever. "We'll rate you guys on different aspects of being a husband, and whoever scores highest gets bragging rights for the month." I watched her demonstrate the scoring system on her phone, showing how each wife would rate all the husbands on a scale of 1 to 10. The categories were extensive: financial stability, communication skills, appearance, helpfulness around the house, social skills, and something called spouse appreciation level that made my jaw clench. The first red flag should have been how prepared she was. This wasn't a spontaneous idea. She had printed scorecards, created the digital system, and even prepared little prizes for the winners. The second red flag was the way she looked at me when she explained the rules, like she was doing me a favor by giving me a chance to prove myself. "Honey, this is ridiculous," I said, keeping my voice level. "Since when do we need other people to rate our marriage?" She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't be such a sport killer. It's just for fun. Besides, I think you'll do great." The way she said it suggested she thought exactly the opposite. The other men were already being pulled into various evaluation scenarios around the room. One guy was being questioned about his last romantic gesture while his wife took notes. Another was being asked to demonstrate how he loaded the dishwasher while the women critiqued his technique. I stood there watching my wife coordinate this circus with the efficiency of a military operation, and something clicked. This wasn't about fun or games. This was about control, about putting me and these other men in a position where we'd have to perform for approval, where our worth as husbands would be determined by a panel of judges who'd already made up their minds. "So, what happens if someone doesn't want to participate?" I asked, crossing my arms. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to me, and I could see the other wives exchanging glances. My wife's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Well, that would be pretty selfish, wouldn't it?" she said, her voice taking on that edge I'd been hearing more often lately. "I mean, we're all here, everything's set up. It's just one evening, right?" I nodded slowly. "Just one evening of being judged by a committee on whether I'm good enough." One of the other wives spoke up. "It's not like that. We're all friends here. We just want to see how our husbands stack up against each other. It's motivational." Motivational. That word hung in the air like a threat. I looked around at the other men, all of whom were avoiding eye contact now. They were going to go through with this. They were going to let their wives and a group of virtual strangers assign them scores based on arbitrary criteria. "You know what?" I said, reaching into my pocket for my phone. "I've got a better idea for a competition." My wife's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Well, if we're doing competitions tonight, I think we should make it interesting. How about we compete to see who can recognize toxic behavior the fastest? Or, better yet, who can maintain their self-respect while being disrespected in their own home?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The other wives stopped their note-taking and stared at me. My wife's face went through several expressions before settling on forced confusion. "I don't understand what you're implying," she said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it directly. This whole setup is designed to humiliate us, and I'm not participating." I looked around the room at the other men. "But hey, if you guys want to compete for the approval of people who apparently think you need improvement, go ahead. I'll be competing in a different category tonight." "Which category is that?" my wife asked, her voice tight. I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "The category where I maintain my dignity. Should be an easy win, considering I'm apparently the only one competing." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the wheels turning in everyone's heads. The other husbands were starting to look at the scorecards in their hands with new eyes. My wife's carefully orchestrated evening was beginning to unravel, and we both knew it. "Fine," she said finally, her mask slipping completely. If you want to ruin everyone's fun because you're too insecure to handle a little friendly competition, that's on you. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. There it is, the real reason behind this whole thing. Thanks for clearing that up. The evening was far from over, but the game had definitely changed. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally playing to win. After my little declaration, the other couples decided to continue with their husband evaluation game anyway. I watched from the kitchen while they went through their charade, but what I heard during those next 2 hours changed everything. The wives had formed a tight circle on the couch, their phones out, actively scoring the men on various tasks. But it wasn't the scoring that caught my attention, it was their commentary. "Look at how he's folding that towel," one of them said, giggling. "Does he think that's actually helpful?" "Mine does the same thing," another replied. "He acts like he's doing me such a favor by loading the dishwasher, but then I have to redo half of it anyway." My wife chimed in with her own contribution. "At least your husband tries to be romantic sometimes. Mine thinks ordering takeout counts as a date night." I stood there, beer in hand, listening to them tear apart their husbands like they were discussing defective appliances. The men, meanwhile, were trying their best to impress their panel of judges, completely oblivious to the fact that they'd already been written off. That's when I noticed something else. My wife kept glancing at her phone, and not just for the scoring app. She was checking messages, a lot of messages. When she thought no one was looking, she typed quick responses, always with that same secretive smile. During a bathroom break, I managed to get a glimpse of her screen. It was a group chat called Husband Report Cards, with over a dozen women in it. The messages were flying fast, and what I saw made my blood run cold. "Currently watching the husbands perform like trained seals," my wife had written. "Mine is being his usual difficult self. They're all so pathetic when they try to impress us," came a reply from someone named Jennifer. "But at least we get good material for next week's ratings." Next week's ratings. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was ongoing. I scrolled up quickly and saw weeks of messages all focused on rating, comparing, and criticizing their husbands. There were categories I hadn't even heard of tonight: bedroom performance, social embarrassment level. How much they annoy me this week. But the worst part was seeing my own name come up repeatedly, screenshots of my texts to my wife analyzed and mocked, details about our private conversations shared for entertainment, even photos of me doing household chores apparently taken without my knowledge and used as evidence of my inadequacy. "He thinks he's so smart," my wife had written just 2 days ago, "but he doesn't even realize how much he's failing as a husband. Tonight's competition should put him in his place." I put her phone back exactly where I found it and returned to the living room. The game was still going on, but now I was seeing it with completely different eyes. This wasn't about improvement or motivation. This was systematic humiliation, and it had been going on for months. The other wives were still making their comments, but now I was listening for the pattern. Every single one of them was trained to find fault, to point out deficiencies, to make their husbands feel inadequate, and the husbands were eating it up, actually thanking them for the feedback. "You know what, guys?" I said, walking back into the room. "I need to ask you something." Everyone looked up from their scorecards and evaluation sheets. "Do any of you actually enjoy being married to your wives?" The question hit like a bomb. The women immediately started protesting, but I held up my hand. "I'm not asking the wives, I'm asking the husbands. When was the last time any of you felt genuinely appreciated by your wife? Not tolerated, not managed, but actually appreciated?" The silence stretched on. I could see the wheels turning in the other men's heads, probably for the first time in years. "That's not a fair question," one of the wives said quickly. "Of course we appreciate our husbands." "Do you?" I asked, turning to face her directly. "Because I've been listening to you all evening, and I haven't heard a single positive thing about any of them. Not one." My wife stood up, her face flushed. "This is completely inappropriate. You're ruining everyone's night." "Am I? Or am I just pointing out what everyone already knows but won't say?" I looked around the room. "How many of you knew your wives had a group chat where they rate your performance as husbands every week?" The color drained from every face in the room. The wives looked at each other in panic while the husbands looked confused and hurt. "That's private," my wife said, her voice shaking slightly. "You had no right to look at my phone." "You're right," I said. "Just like you had no right to share private details about our marriage with a dozen strangers. Just like you had no right to take photos of me without my permission to use as evidence of my shortcomings." The room erupted in heated whispers as the other couples started putting the pieces together. Phones were being grabbed, questions were being asked, and the carefully constructed evening was falling apart. "This is exactly why you scored so low in the preliminary rankings," my wife said, her voice getting louder. "You can't handle any kind of constructive criticism." "Preliminary rankings." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean the rankings where you and your friends spent months documenting every way we disappoint you? Those rankings?" I pulled out my own phone and held it up. "Well, since we're all about fair competition here, I think it's time to start my own scoring system. Category 1. Wives who respect their husbands enough not to mock them behind their backs. Current score, 0 out of 4. The panic in my wife's eyes was immediate and obvious. She realized that her carefully orchestrated game had backfired spectacularly, and now she was the one being evaluated. The other wives were looking at her like she'd led them into a trap, which, in a way, she had. Category 2, I continued. Wives who can handle having their own behavior scrutinized. Let's see how this plays out. The evening had taken a complete turn, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally playing a game where I knew the rules. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, but my wife wasn't backing down. If anything, she was doubling down on her strategy, probably thinking she could regain control through sheer force of will. "You want to know about constructive criticism?" she said, her voice rising. "Fine. Let's talk about how you never take initiative around the house. How you think doing the bare minimum makes you husband of the year, how you've completely let yourself go and expect me to pretend I don't notice." The other couples were watching like they were at a tennis match, their heads turning between us with each exchange. But I could see something else in their eyes now, recognition. They were starting to see their own marriages reflected in this confrontation. "Keep going," I said calmly, pulling out my phone. "I'm taking notes for my own scoring system." "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're being childish." "Am I? Because it seems like you've been doing this exact same thing for months just behind my back. The only difference is I'm being honest about it." I looked around the room. "Speaking of honesty, why don't you tell everyone about the rating system you've been using? The one where you've been documenting every way I failed to meet your standards." She shot a panicked look at the other wives, but they were too busy dealing with their own damage control to help her. "That's taken completely out of context," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is it? Because I saw the photos, the screenshots, the detailed analysis of why I'm such a disappointment." I turned to address the room. "Did you all know that my wife has been photographing me doing chores so she can share them with her friends and point out everything I'm doing wrong?" The other husbands were staring at their wives now, the pieces clicking into place. One of them was already scrolling through his wife's phone, his face getting redder by the second. "This is different," my wife said desperately. "We were trying to help each other become better wives by identifying areas where our husbands could improve by supporting each other through the challenges of marriage." I nodded slowly. "Right. So when you wrote that I was socially embarrassing and completely clueless about what women actually want, that was you being a supportive wife." The room went dead silent. Even the other wives stopped their whispered conversations to stare at her. "I never said that," she lied, but her face was already giving her away. "You want me to read the exact message? Because I took screenshots." I held up my phone. July 15th, 9:37 p.m. "He thinks he's being charming when he talks to my friends, but he's just socially embarrassing, completely clueless about what women actually want. Sometimes I wonder why I even bother." The color drained from her face. Around the room, the other wives were looking at their phones, probably realizing that their husbands might have seen their messages too. "That was private," she whispered. "So was our marriage, but you made it public property." I looked at her directly. "You turned our relationship into entertainment for your friends. You made me into a character in your little drama, someone you could mock and criticize for points." One of the other husbands spoke up. "Is this real? Are you all doing this?" His wife started to answer, but I interrupted. "Check the group chat called Husband Report Cards. Should be right there on her phone." The explosion that followed was immediate. Voices raised, phones grabbed, accusations flying. The carefully orchestrated evening had devolved into chaos, and my wife was looking at me like I'd just burned down everything she'd built. "You've ruined everything," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "These were my friends, were they? Because real friends don't need you to provide them with ammunition to mock your husband. Real friends respect your marriage, not treat it like a reality show." "You don't understand what it's like," she said, tears starting to form. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the expectations. Sometimes I need to vent." Venting is calling your sister after a fight and saying you're frustrated. This wasn't venting. This was systematic documentation of every way you think I'm failing, shared with people who don't even know me well enough to have an opinion. The other couples were having their own heated discussions now, but I could see the dynamic shifting. The husbands were asking questions they'd never asked before, and the wives were scrambling to explain behavior they'd never had to defend. "I want you to leave," my wife said suddenly, her voice cold. "Excuse me, I want you to pack a bag and leave tonight. I can't deal with this right now." I stared at her for a long moment, watching her try to regain control the only way she knew how, by making ultimatums, by forcing me to choose between my dignity and her approval. "You know what?" I said, a smile spreading across my face. "That's the first good idea you've had all evening." Her confidence faltered. She'd clearly expected me to back down, to apologize, to beg for another chance. "I'll go pack," I continued. "But not because you're kicking me out because I'm choosing to leave. There's a difference." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means I'm done competing for your approval. I'm done being evaluated like I'm applying for a job in my own marriage. I'm done being your content for group chats and scorecards." I headed toward the stairs, then turned back. "And just so we're clear, I'm not leaving because I'm the problem. I'm leaving because I finally realized that someone who needs to rate and rank me isn't someone who actually wants to be married to me." The room was completely silent now, everyone watching this final exchange. "You'll be back," she said. But her voice was uncertain. "Will I? Because I'm pretty sure I just won the only competition that actually matters, the one where I chose self-respect over being treated like a performing monkey." I headed upstairs to pack, leaving behind a room full of couples who were finally having conversations they should have had years ago. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. I stayed at a hotel that night, and by morning my phone was buzzing with messages, not from my wife but from two of the other husbands who'd been at the house. They wanted to meet for coffee. I found the group chat. The first one said as soon as we sat down, 6 months of messages. 6 months of them rating everything I do. The second husband nodded grimly. "Same here. I had no idea my wife was sharing photos of me with strangers, making fun of how I eat breakfast." We sat there for a moment, 3 grown men realizing we'd been living in a reality show without knowing it. "What are you going to do?" I asked them. "I don't know," the first one admitted. "She says it was harmless, that I'm overreacting." "Mine too," said the second. "She's acting like I'm crazy for being upset about it." I pulled out my phone and opened a new group chat. Well, since they like rating systems so much, maybe it's time we created our own. I added both of them and typed the first message, "Welcome to the Dignity Recovery Group. Today's topic, wives who think marriage is a performance review." They both laughed, but it wasn't really funny. It was the kind of laugh you make when you realize how ridiculous your situation has become. "Seriously though," I continued, "what did your wives say when you confronted them?" "That I was being too sensitive," the first husband replied. "That women need to talk to their friends about relationship stuff," said the second. "Same script," I said. Mine tried to make it sound like I was the problem for not wanting to be graded like a homework assignment. My phone buzzed a text from my wife. "We need to talk. Come home." I showed them the message. "Here we go. Stage 2 of damage control." "Are you going back?" the second husband asked. "Oh, I'm going back," I said. "But not for the reason she thinks." When I walked into the house later that afternoon, my wife was sitting at the kitchen table with what looked like a prepared speech. She'd cleaned the house, made my favorite dinner, and even put on the dress I'd complimented months ago. "I'm glad you came back," she said, standing up with a careful smile. "I think we just had a misunderstanding last night. The whole game thing got out of hand. I can see how you might have taken it the wrong way." I sat down across from her, noting how she was framing everything how I might have taken it wrong, not how she did something wrong. "Tell me about the group chat," I said directly. Her smile faltered slightly. "What about it? How long has it been going on?" "It's not what you think. We just share relationship advice and support each other by rating our husbands like restaurant reviews." She was quiet for a moment, probably calculating her next move. "Sometimes we vent, that's normal." "Show me the chat. What if it's just normal venting? Show me the messages. Let me see what support looks like." The panic in her eyes was immediate. "That's private. Those are conversations between friends. About me. About our marriage." "How is that private from me?" She stood up, agitated. "You're being unreasonable. You can't expect to read every conversation I have with my friends." "I don't want to read every conversation. I want to read the ones where you've been documenting my failures as a husband for 6 months. It wasn't like that. I pulled out my phone and started typing in the group chat with the other husbands. Day 1 of wife damage control. Current tactics, gaslighting, minimizing, deflection, score. 0 points for taking responsibility. What are you doing? She asked, trying to see my screen. Starting my own rating system. Turns out I'm pretty good at documenting behavior too. Her face went white. You're texting other people about our private conversation. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Feels different when you're the one being evaluated, doesn't it? She sat back down, realizing her strategy wasn't working. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that what you did wasn't harmless. I want you to acknowledge that turning our marriage into content for your friends was wrong. And I want you to decide if you actually want to be married to me or if you just want someone to manage and critique. Of course I want to be married to you. Do you? Because your behavior says otherwise. Your messages say otherwise. Your whole scoring system says otherwise. She was quiet for a long time, probably realizing that her usual tactics weren't going to work this time. I can delete the group chat, she offered. That's not the point. The point is that you created it in the first place. The point is that you thought it was okay to mock me behind my back for months. I wasn't mocking you. I stared at her. You literally took photos of me doing dishes so you could show your friends how wrong I was doing it. She couldn't deny that one because we both knew it was true. So here's my offer, I continued. We can try to fix this, but it starts with you taking full responsibility for what you did, no minimizing, no excuses, no blaming me for overreacting. And it means no more rating systems, no more group chats about our marriage, and no more treating me like I'm auditioning for the role of your husband. She nodded slowly, but I could see the resistance in her eyes. She didn't think she'd done anything that bad, and she definitely didn't like being told she couldn't talk to her friends about me. And if I don't agree to those terms? She asked. I smiled. Then I win the competition after all, the one where I chose my self-respect over being treated like a contestant in a game I never agreed to play. For a moment, I thought she might actually take responsibility. She sat there looking at her hands, and I could see the wheels turning. But then she looked up with that expression I'd learned to recognize over the years, the one that meant she was about to try a different angle. You're right, she said, her voice soft and apologetic. I can see how that might have hurt your feelings. Might have. There it was. But you have to understand, she continued. I was just trying to be a better wife. The other women in the group give such good advice. They help me see things from different perspectives, like how to motivate you to be more involved in our relationship, how to encourage you to take more initiative. I leaned back in my chair. So the solution was to photograph me doing chores wrong and share it with strangers? They're not strangers. They're my friends. Name 3 personal things you know about Jennifer from the group chat, not about her husband, about her. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Right. They're not your friends. They're your audience, and I was your content. She tried a different approach. Look, maybe I went about it wrong, but my intentions were good. I love you, and I want our marriage to work. Then why did you write that you wonder why you even bother with me? Her face flushed. I was having a bad day. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. For 6 months, you had a 6-month bad day? She stood up, pacing. Now you're taking everything out of context. You don't understand what it's like being married to someone who doesn't pick up on social cues, who embarrasses you in front of other people. There it is, I said quietly. The real truth. What? I embarrass you. That's what this is really about. She realized what she'd said, but it was too late to take it back. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. And honestly, that's the most helpful thing you've said all day. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to the group chat with the other husbands. Update. Wife admits I embarrass her in front of other people. Finally getting some honest communication. Stop doing that, she said, reaching for my phone. Stop texting about our private conversation. I held the phone away from her. Why? You've been doing it for months. That's different. How? She couldn't answer because we both knew it wasn't different at all. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up. I'm going to give you 1 week to decide if you actually want to be married to someone who embarrasses you, or if you'd rather keep shopping around for husband upgrades with your rating committee. That's not fair. Fair? You've been grading me like a science project for half a year, and you're worried about fair? I said I'd delete the group chat. That's not enough anymore. The group chat was just a symptom. The real problem is that you don't respect me enough to have problems with me directly. Instead, you turn our marriage into entertainment for people who don't even like me. They don't dislike you. Really? Because I saw the messages. I saw what they really think of all their husbands. This isn't a support group, it's a complaint department. She was crying now, but they weren't the kind of tears that meant she understood what she'd done wrong. They were frustrated tears, the kind you cry when your manipulation isn't working. "So, what do you want me to do?" she asked. "I want you to decide if you want to be married to me as I am without a committee of judges telling you how I could be better. I want you to decide if you can handle being in a relationship where you deal with problems directly instead of outsourcing them to the internet. And if I can't, then you'll save us both a lot of time and trouble." She wiped her eyes, and I could see her regrouping. "You're being extreme. This is all fixable." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you spent 6 months proving that you think I'm fundamentally flawed. That's not something you fix with deleting an app." "I never said you were fundamentally flawed." I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to one of her messages I'd screenshotted. Quote, "Some men are just not cut out for marriage. They think showing up is enough." Her face went pale. "I was talking generally," she said weakly, "in a thread about you loading the dishwasher wrong." She sat back down, finally realizing there was no talking her way out of this one. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to say whether you actually want to be married to me, or whether you want to be married to some improved version of me that exists only in your head." The silence stretched on. I could see her weighing her options, probably thinking about how this would look to her friends, how she'd explain it, whether she could find a way to make this my fault. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You've got a week. But I'm not waiting around to find out if I pass your evaluation. I'm staying at the hotel until you decide." "That's not necessary." "It is for me, because I've spent 6 months living with someone who was secretly documenting my failures. I need some space to remember what it feels like to not be under constant review." I headed toward the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I hope you figure out what you really want. But I'm not competing for your approval anymore. Either you want me or you don't." As I walked out, I heard her call after me, "You're being childish." I didn't turn around, because for the first time in months I was being anything but childish. I was finally acting like an adult who knew what he deserved. The week passed faster than I expected. I spent most of it at the hotel working, thinking, and checking in with the other husbands in our group chat. Their situations were playing out differently, but the pattern was the same. The wives scrambling to minimize what they'd done while the husbands finally asked questions they should have asked years ago. On day 6, my wife called, not texted, called. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble. "Maybe we can work this out." I deleted the group chat, and I talked to a counselor about communication and marriage. "That's a start," I said. "What did the counselor say?" "That couples need to address issues directly instead of seeking validation from outside sources." "Interesting. And what else?" There was a pause. "That I may have been using the group as a way to avoid dealing with my own insecurities about our relationship." Now we were getting somewhere. "Go on. Look, can you just come home so we can talk about this properly? Have you decided what you want?" Another pause. "I want to try to fix this." "That's not what I asked. Do you want to be married to me as I am? Or do you want to be married to some improved version that meets your standards?" The silence stretched on long enough that I knew the answer before she said it. "I think people can always improve in relationships," she said carefully. There it was. Even after everything, she still couldn't accept me without conditions. She still thought I needed to be fixed, managed, improved. "Thank you for being honest," I said. "What does that mean?" "It means you've answered my question. You don't want to be married to me, you want to be married to your project." "That's not fair." "It's completely fair. After 6 months of being rated and 6 days to think about it, you still can't say you want me as I am." I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. "So that's it? You're giving up on us?" "I'm not giving up. I'm choosing myself. There's a difference." "Please don't do this. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing something for me. I'm choosing to be with someone who doesn't think I need constant improvement. But I love you. You love your idea of what I could become. That's not the same thing." The call ended shortly after that. 2 days later, I got the paperwork I'd been expecting. She'd filed for divorce, probably on the advice of her lawyer and her remaining friends from the group chat. 6 months later, I ran into one of the other husbands from that night at a coffee shop. He looked better, lighter. "How did things work out with your wife?" I asked. "Divorced," he said, but he was smiling. "Best decision I ever made." Turns out she'd been running her rating system for 2 years, not 6 months. "And the other guy?" "He went to counseling with his wife. They're working it out, but he made her prove she deleted everything and cut contact with the women in the group." We sat there for a moment, drinking our coffee. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Which part, standing up for myself or getting out of a relationship where I was constantly being evaluated?" "Either." I thought about it. "No, I regret not seeing it sooner, but I don't regret leaving. I'm dating someone now who thinks I'm pretty great as is. Same here. It's amazing how much better you feel when you're not being graded all the time." He was right. The woman I'd been seeing for the past few months had never once suggested I needed improvement. She liked how I loaded the dishwasher. She thought my social skills were fine. She didn't need a committee to validate her choice in men. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "My ex-wife is still in therapy, still trying to figure out why her relationships don't work out, still rating guys. According to her social media, she's got a whole new system for evaluating potential partners. Some kind of compatibility scoring system she learned from a dating coach." We both laughed, but it wasn't mean-spirited. It was the laughter of men who dodged a bullet and knew it. "Think she'll ever figure it out?" he asked. "Maybe, but that's not my problem anymore." I finished my coffee and stood up to leave. "You know what? I won that competition from that night." "What's that?" "The fastest exit from a situation where I wasn't wanted for who I was. Turns out I'm actually pretty competitive when the prize is worth winning." Walking out of that coffee shop, I realized something. I hadn't just won a competition that night 6 months ago. I'd won my life back. And unlike her scoring system, this victory actually meant something.